Hi, welcome back. You're still watching Market Trends right here on ETNOW. Yesterday, Inox Wind had a stellar debut day on the markets, so we thought best to get a sense of what the space is, what the growth prospects of the space look like at this point in time. The renewable energy sector has been an area of focus for the government as they've tripled their expectations on wind power and renewable power energy to almost 60,000 megawatts plus by 2022. Sumant Sinha, Chairman and CEO, ReNew Power Ventures, joins in to throw more perspective on the growth potential as well as get a sense of investor interest in the sector right now. Good to have you on the show, Sumant. Thanks very much for taking out the time. The market is very excited about this space. So just wanted to get a sense from you on how much of the growth is a reality for now, because some of these orders are, long gestation and the numbers have still not trickled in. Now, give us a reality check of what the growth potential looks like for the space.
Well, as far as the space is concerned, the government has clearly set targets that are much more ambitious than what we have been achieving so far.
So I think there's a bit of we'll just come back to you in a bit. I think there's a bit of an audio glitch there, but there you go. The current wind power capacity for renewable power, standing at about 21,000 megawatts. The government is saying that you're going to be putting in more than that, tripling that to about 60,000 megawatts by 2022. So those are fairly ambitious plans as far as the renewable power space is concerned. But Sumant, you were making your opening comment on, the growth prospects for this sector.
Yeah, I was saying that right now we have an installed base of about 23,000 megawatts of wind. The government has set a target of 60,000 by 2022, which is an additional 37,000 megawatts in the next 7 years. We've been adding about 2,000 megawatts every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and to meet the target we'll have to do about 5,000 megawatts every year. Now, of course, the question really is, are we going to achieve the target? Because the target is just that, it's a target, and that does not mean that it's going to get achieved. So the question really is, what is happening on the ground that might give us some visibility about the achievement of this target going forward? And there are a couple of very important things that still need to happen, and until those actually take place, we'll just carry on at the current capacity add, which is about 2,000 megawatts every year. The first and most important thing is that the renewable purchase obligation targets that the government has set at the national level, those have to be enforced at the state level. And unless those are enforced, then it will not create adequate demand for renewable energy in general. So I think that's the first thing that has to be done. The second thing that has to be done is that states need to come out with clearer sets of policies which give longer term visibility, because right now what happens is that states come out with tariff policies for a year at a time, and that is not enough to give planning, give enough visibility for long term planning. So I think that's the second area that the government has to work with the states on, to try to give that longer term visibility so that we can plan capacity add going forward. And the third thing is that we need to make sure that the grid build out is happening on par with the actual capacity build out on the generation side. And again, the government is working on those areas. But again, we have to see, there might be pockets where some constraints might happen and so on. But by and large, I think the government is serious about the target, and over the next 1 year or so, we should start seeing some of these things that I mentioned actually happening, which should then lead to much higher capacity add going forward. But whether the 2,000 goes to 4,000, 5,000 or more is really the question at this point in time.
Mr. Sinha, interesting that we are having this conversation at a time when one of the companies just got listed into the market. The primary issue got a very good response, and even after getting listed, the stock kept on going higher. Also pull up the Suzlon stock, and you would see from the lows of 7 rupees a share, the stock is almost 30, and a big marquee investor has come in. Wanted your opinion on how this massive growth which we are talking about is going to be funded, and how are you gauging the investor appetite on ground for these projects? It's a capital intensive area. You think that this growth which we are talking about, how much of it could be help from the government and how much could be private funded?
So all of it will be privately funded. The government is not active in the space right now except through a small amount through NTPC, and that's primarily in solar. On the wind side, most of the capacity add will be coming from the private sector. In terms of the performance of these two stocks, I can't comment really on what investors are necessarily seeing or what assumptions they're making. and how specifically these companies are expected to do going forward. But all I can say is that, we've been doing 2,000 megawatts of capacity.
पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट है देश के लिए उधर में माइक क्या उधर
That was, of course, our finance minister talking about the outlook upgrade from Moody's, which happened yesterday, and higher GDP estimate by Fitch also coming. It's a short point being made by finance minister. Mr. Sinha, sorry to interrupt. We had Mr. Finance Minister also joining us on the show for that brief comment, but you were making a point that there seem to be, at least you are gauging, decent appetite from the investor community for this sector.
Yeah, there is decent appetite, but as I said, it all depends on government policy and government tariffs. Keep in mind one important factor, which is that going forward, wind is going to increasingly have to compete with solar as well. Because ultimately they're both renewable energy sources, and so we have to make sure that wind is able to compete from a cost standpoint and from an acceptability into the grid standpoint. And there issues like scheduling and forecasting of wind, the structural issues of the fact that wind in India tends to blow in the monsoons, those are things that the industry has to work together with the distribution companies to try to overcome. So I think there is a lot of growth possibility. Certainly the capacity adds from a resource availability standpoint is there, but I think a lot of evolution has to happen on the regulatory framework and on the market framework for us to see much higher capacity adds going forward.
Okay, Sumant, we're completely running out of time, so I just wanted to get in a quick view because, last year you had also stated that you're perhaps looking at an IPO for ReNew Power Ventures. And there is, of course, institutional investment in your business as well. What's the expectation as far as sustainability of investor interest is concerned? Because we've had, in the past, Suzlon enjoyed a lot of investor interest, then that died down. Now with Inox Wind, there seems to be some resurgence. How sustainable is this space for investors?
Well, the wind turbine manufacturing space is very fundamentally different from our space because we are a generator. We depend, once we set up a project, it generates annuity revenues going forward. On the manufacturing side, it's a very different business. They depend on year-on-year capacity adds, and within that, their market share has to go up. Our business, I think, is very stable. I think the government, as I said, is looking to push this, and therefore, I think that we'll be able to add more and more capacity going forward. And every year, what we add then becomes growth to our existing pool of assets already installed. So I'm bullish about the sector. I'm also bullish about solar, in which we are also active. And so I think that over the next few years, certainly under this government, there will be a lot for us to do, and we certainly look forward to that.
All right, Mr. Sinha, we'll let you go on that one. Thanks a lot for joining us on the show with your perspective on this sector. Onwards then, the government and the RBI are a step closer now to the composition of the Monetary Policy Committee. Sources are telling ETNOW that after much discussion, the government believes that the RBI governor must have a conditional veto in this committee. Ruchi Bhatia joins us with exclusive details of the story. Ruchi?